Hi, everybody. So thanks for joining us. And thank you for being patient with our technical learning curve. So as the effects of COVID are different for each region, we have asked representatives from regional industry associations across Canada to speak about their particular situation. We asked our speakers to record a short introductory video introducing themselves, their association, and to give a summary of the effects of COVID on the industry in their region. Following that, we're going to dive a little deeper into the topic and answer audience questions if there is time. So we're going to start with the videos.
Hello, I'm Carole Reinhardt, President and CEO of the Atlantic Canada Aerospace and Defense Association. We are a 170-member organization representing aerospace, defense, and security companies and partners in the provinces of Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Our members range from large OEMs to small micro businesses. The impacts of COVID-19 on our members have been inconsistent. For some members, it has required a substantial decline, and for others, it's been an opportunity for growth. Companies most impacted have been in the aerospace aviation industries, with less impact for those in defense supply chains. Information compiled in October of 2020 indicate that the Atlantic region has lost over 1,000 jobs in aerospace and aviation industries. That means approximately $60 million in lost wages. ICT and digital solution companies reported increased demands for their products and services. 97% of our members continued to operate throughout the pandemic. Some report acquiring new business as a result of existing suppliers not being able to meet contract requirements. Two key concerns that we're hearing: one, the impacts of phasing out of support programs, which is occurring later on in the spring of 2021, and ensuring that federal procurement programs remain on track. There are currently restrictions in all 4 provinces on travel to the region, and this has made it difficult for our members to meet with clients and manage operations in other parts of Canada. The Atlantic bubble essentially burst a week ago, and this has resulted in additional restrictions for members. Most of our companies are focused on short-term planning only these days. ACADA, along with our partners, will continue to monitor and track the business climate to best support our members.
Hi, I'm Nathalie Paré. I'm the Executive Director of the CAMAQ, the Sectorial Committee for Aerospace Industry in Quebec. The Sectorial Committee of Aerospace in Quebec is covering the industry of manufacturing for aerospace and aviation. We're also covering the air transportation, the maintenance of airplanes, and also the airport in the province. As the whole country, we've been very affected in Quebec by the effect of COVID. Regarding the manufacturing sector, the ones that are doing defense business are doing a little bit better because usually the contracts are continuing. Every business that are doing other things that defense have a little bit more of a hard time. So far, what I hear is that they have stabilized the operation, but they are looking forward to start over and have and recall employees that have been temporarily laid off, and have and keep those competencies that are very crucial for the industry. So far, the air transportation has been very affected because the frontier that are closed is affecting them a lot. Not being able to have flights. So it's difficult to keep their pilots and their employees, to work and not to and keep their hours of flying, because that's a requirement. The airport has been also very affected because there's no flight, so there's no operation in the airport. So all of them too, they're looking to keep their employees and their operation running. So for some small airport, it can also look to be affecting, the operation that they can offer. So far for 2021, we're looking for a strong implication of the government, whether it's federal, provincial. We need the support of our industry and keep our labor and manpower experiences that is very crucial for the country and not to lose it, So what I'm asking for the government is help us, to stay and give the business that we have always done in the past and keep their employees and competency in the industry.
Hi, my name is Moira Harvey. I'm the Executive Director of the Ontario Aerospace Council. We represent over 200 member companies here in Ontario. Majority of those are manufacturing companies. We have a number of OEMs and a larger number of tier ones, and then down through the supply chain. So COVID has had a significant effect. It certainly had a major impact at the beginning, where we had OEMs who were pushing out deliveries or refusing deliveries, which was definitely a challenge for the SMEs and some of the tier 2 and tier 1 companies in our region. Overall, companies who had a diversified customer base, so not only large commercial aircraft, but also business jet and defense or military aircraft, managed to go through the downturn a little less painfully. But overall, we had about a 30 to 40% drop in revenue, and in total, probably between 15 and 20% in layoffs, so a reduction in the workforce. Couple of the big concerns are making sure that we stay engaged with that workforce, so that when we do start to see the recovery, we do have those skills available to us, and certainly trying to keep aerospace as a viable career option for young people coming into the industry. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Wendell Wiebe, and I represent Manitoba Aerospace, which is an industry-led sector council. We collaborate to develop a world-class industry and workforce through partnerships with Manitoba educational institutions and other key stakeholders. In Manitoba, our member companies include aerospace manufacturers, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and a number of airlines. In September, we surveyed our member companies to find out what their perspective was. The following highlights some of the points they raised. Revenue loss. 3/4 of our companies reported revenue reductions at the start of the pandemic. 50% of those have reported a near return to 2019 levels by the fall. Those who manufacture only commercial aircraft components and those who provide MRO services to airlines continue to experience significant revenue reductions. Working remotely. Most companies have some staff working remotely, but haven't seen a significant reduction in their productivity. Maintaining pandemic protocols. This has been a noticeable cost to their operations. Some have indicated that their employees are becoming more complacent with the protocols that were established in the spring. Absenteeism. 50% of the companies have reported instances of absenteeism due to lack of childcare, school closures, or staff fear of the pandemic. A small percentage indicated that this was a significant issue to their business. Supply chain disruption. Over half our companies indicated supply chain challenges in the first few months of the pandemic. Only one indicated that it remains an ongoing issue, primarily with US-based suppliers. Changes in staffing levels. 1/3 of our companies laid off a significant portion of their workforce. This represents close to 1,000 workers in Manitoba. Others companies remained relatively stable. One grew significantly due to pivoting the business to produce PPE products. Travel restrictions. Over half the companies indicated that travel restrictions were impacting customer relations and new business development. Some of them reported that Manitoba government's requirement for a 14-day self-isolation of arrivals from Eastern Canada was significantly disrupting their business operations. And lastly, a few indicated there was a lot of lack of clarity with government programming, which was very frustrating. That is my comments to begin with. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Heather Bell, and I am the current board chair of the British Columbia Aviation Council. BCAC is a member-driven and funded organization that has been encouraging and supporting the safe, sustainable development of aviation and aerospace in British Columbia since 1938. Our 600 members and 2,300 supporters come from all sectors of the aviation and aerospace industry. We represent individual pilots, small air carriers, airports, flight training units, maintenance, repair, and manufacturing. Along with YVR, our country's second busiest airport, British Columbia is home to 57 municipal airports, the largest MRO sector in the country, vast helicopter operations, 262 Transport Canada certified companies, and the third largest aerospace sector in Canada. Our vision at BCAC is an aviation and aerospace industry that is visible, connected, and thriving. In 2019, our aviation and aerospace industry directly employed over 44,000 professionals and contributed $12.6 billion in gross domestic product to our provincial economy. Previous to COVID-19, the aviation industry was thriving with over a decade of sustained growth, but our once healthy industry is now in deep trouble. Most of this industry, aviation and aerospace, is at a near standstill. Our Canadian airlines are experiencing over 80% reduction in operations, and operators are bracing for a long period of financial struggle and service impacts. While large airlines are struggling with the impacts of this reality, small air operators critical to the ecosystem are also at great risk. These are essential small businesses working in a highly regulated, capital-intensive industry with substantial fixed costs. Many of them may not survive this crisis and will be forced to close permanently. This may leave smaller, remote, and Indigenous communities without reliable transportation options and access to essential services. These services are a lifeline, and the risks to these communities are real. Our airports are at risk due to lack of revenues and the reality that travel will continue to be restricted. Airport revenues are near zero, while costs to maintain high regulatory and safety standards remain. In addition to the airport hubs, there are small airports critical to the ecosystem, and without these small airports, the system breaks down. We know that YVR has laid off 30% of its staff. Many airports throughout British Columbia have also reduced their workforce by 30 to 40%. Employment in aerospace is down, but not as drastically as in the aviation sector. And for some of our sectors, we are seeing small levels of growth, for instance, in freight and mail and medevac services. Flight training also remains solid at this time, but we're unsure if this will be sustained, as the sector relies heavily on foreign students who are facing difficulties obtaining visas to enter our country. Governments have been active and nimble under COVID in many of their responses to our regulatory needs. However, to date, financial support for the sector is trivial compared to support given in other developed countries. This puts our nation at a serious medium-term competitive disadvantage. We need to prioritize and enhance our financial efforts and double down on innovative ways and means to ensure this industry is stable and ready to respond to vaccine distribution challenges and play its essential role in rebuilding our modern economy.
Thank you. So that was great information, just amazing. Thank you all. So we're going to start with a poll question for the audience, and we will present the results after the panel has a chance to discuss the question. So remember, the polling function is in the right of the main screen, and you'll see a panel with chat polls and people at the top. So the question is, as the industry recovery gathers momentum, will we again have a significant labor shortage? In 2 years, in 5 years, or it won't be an issue for many years to come? So since we have a lot to discuss, I'm going to apologize in advance if I cut anybody off or if I cut anybody short, but we do have a lot of great things to discuss. So now I'm going to start by asking the panel the same question as the audience. So as the recovery gathers momentum, will we again have a significant labor shortage? So let's start with Carole. Over to you.
Thanks, Theresa. A lot of our companies in the East they have a lot of different types of business lines. So it's not like they're focused on one particular business line, but the reality is that it's kind of a double standard. So those companies that have actually shed employees still have critical labor shortages. You know, we've had an issue here where a lot of our community college programs are holding and not going forward with their programs. And so it's we have a lot of retirements. We have no new grads coming up through the system, at least for the next in the short term. And still we have critical labor shortages in some areas. And so in our region, there was a labor shortage before. It's going to be back with the vengeance, and the escalation once everything starts to get going again is going to really impact the ability for companies to grow and to operate and get back at regular operations.
Thanks very much. Wendell, what about in your region?
Well, we were fortunate enough, we just got our labor market survey back to us. And in 2019, we're looking at a double-digit requirement that's down to a single digit. I think it's about 7% for the next 2 to 3 years. But then I anticipate that the growth will be there. The industry will come back, and we'll still need to have the workers to fill in those open positions.
Thanks very much. Nathalie?
Hi. In Quebec City, we're doing exactly what Wendell just got back. We're making our survey right now, but so far what I heard, it's depending what business they're in. If they're in manufacturing only, they have temporary put people on layoff for about 10 to 15%. If they're doing defense, they do better. But regarding aviation, it's very difficult because with the frontier closed, the operation are almost all grounded. So it's very difficult, and what I heard right now is that many companies have stabilized the operation so far, but they're worried, are they going to be able to call back all those employees that are temporarily laid off? So that's what I heard right now.
Excellent, thank you. Heather?
So prior to COVID-19 at BCAC, we were very focused on the critical labor shortage in all sectors of our industry. I'll focus a little bit more on aviation because we have a lot of aerospace people in the group here, but the shortages were critical: pilots, air traffic controllers, airport management, maintenance. So certainly we can look at now and say, oh, did COVID solve that problem? Well, while we may not be experiencing those shortages right now, when this industry comes back, it's going to come back with a vengeance, and it's going to be like a tsunami. And it's recovering at a very quick rate in the European countries, in Asia especially. And prior to COVID, we were seeing a huge labor draw from our country to these other countries. And that is going to continue. Any of those people that were out of work or laid off, as the industry recovers in other countries sooner, they'll be drawn there. And this is going to put Canada at a very severe disadvantage, particularly with respect to the labor market. We talked before about when it comes back, it's going to come back like a tsunami. We all know, probably sitting here, that as soon as travel opens up, we all want to go. So everyone's going to want to go, and we're going to see that the opportunities may not be there, or the Canadian market is going to be overtaken internationally. So I think, yes, it's coming back, and when it comes back, it's not going to be good.
Thanks very much. Moira?
So I would echo Heather's comments. Absolutely. I think we are going to see a lot of pent-up demand, and when borders open, there's going to be a high demand for travel. Everyone's going to want to go back to normal and travel around the way they've been used to doing. I think it comes from a number of different areas that will see challenges. Obviously, a lot of the challenges are the ones that we faced going into this, where we were looking at that kind of demand. But now you're going to see things like MRO, which has been pushed out or delayed. All of a sudden, you're looking at all of those aircraft to be absolutely ready to go. So you're going to have a huge demand in that area, which we haven't seen. And through retirements, through layoffs, we're losing a lot of people. We're losing gray hair capital and some of the expertise. How do we manage to stay connected with that? How do we ensure that that comes back when we need it? And that's really a major concern, as well as how do we keep that pipeline full for 2024, 2025 when we need those new students coming in? And right now, I don't know how many parents are going to say, you know what, a career in aerospace and aviation is absolutely the thing for you to do, honey. They're kind of looking at the skies and going, yeah, maybe not so much.
Yeah, exactly. Actually. And yes, Heather, we are all just dying to get on an airplane again, actually, at least our offices. So we're going to check on the poll results, and it looks like, so in 2 years' time, we think, so sorry, we'll repeat the question, I guess. As the industry recovers or gathers momentum, we will have again a significant labor shortage. So in 2 years, 55% of us think in 2 years that's going to happen. 42% in 5 years, and only 3% think it's not going to be an issue at all for many years. So that's pretty incredible. That's it, mostly too because a lot of what we're reading is saying that the recovery really is going to take almost 2 years. So we're thinking, we're going to go right from that recovery into another significant labor shortage. So that's pretty interesting. And you're right about Moira, about the whole outreach, and it's just not good press right now for us to be doing outreach and for expecting the youth of Canada to think that this is a good career choice. And that's going to take a lot of work to make sure that we can attract them again. So in terms of supporting the workforce, what training would support the industry during this recovery period? Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this?
I think not specific. There aren't things that come specifically to mind, but as we were talking about previously with what are the challenges with the labor shortage, our industry is so highly regulated and there are so many requirements around maintaining proficiency and licensing. And we have seen that on behalf of Transport Canada, they have been very good about pushing out timelines and not requiring all those proficiency checks or licensing requirements to be kept up to date. But there's the yin and yang of that. So it's good that we don't have to put the outlay of the time or have people kept on stream to do that. But when it comes and we need them there, we need these people to be proficient and we need them to be, their licenses to be up to date. So I think one of the things that we can look at is having some help with companies being able to keep their labor force proficient and all the requirements of their licensing up to date, even if they're not working.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else want to comment on that? Moira?
Sure. So we were very fortunate and based on the scenario that we all faced in January, we had secured funds with the Ministry of Labour here in Ontario to look at providing an industry-led training program for new hires in the industry. Obviously, by March, when that was actually awarded, things were very different. So we collaborated with them and we managed to work out a plan where we were able to use the funds to enhance employee engagement and retention through this time period. So if people were on CEWS or they were on temporary layoffs or they were working from home and had reduced workloads, we have a program for them now, which is a soft skills program. It's not a certification program per se, as far as regulatory type requirements go, but it engages those who are working in the manufacturing sector in aerospace to improve their skills, get a better understanding of where they fit in the aerospace ecosystem. And we're doing some aerospace specific and custom programs in January. So it's been very successful. We've had some great responses back from the companies who participated, and I'm going to let someone else speak now.
Okay, I've got a question regarding that. Is that an Ontario only initiative, or is that across Canada?
It's an Ontario only.
Okay, all right. Does anybody else want to touch on that, or should we move on?
I can go if you want, Theresa. We were fortunate in Quebec to have the Labor government that gave us $150 million in May of this year, to help companies do training, and keep people. And now we're working with them, to look for upskilling people, upskilling competencies, and took advantage of this moment, to train people and make sure that they're ready. There's the Industry 4.0. There's a lot of new technologies. So why can we use that to upskill people and make sure they're ready? You know, sorry, I'm looking for my word. I'm worried though that most of the time the money is for employees that are at work, but it's not for people who are on layoff. So now we're trying to work with them, you know, so people who are on layoff can be also upskilled and be ready to work when that tsunami come back. Because I agree with my other colleagues from all the country, for the whole country. I mean, when it come back, you know, we're gonna need a lot of people to get those planes ready and do the maintenance. So it's not going to be the time to train them and recertificate them, you know, so we need to work now so they're ready when it come back. So that's the training, regarding training, you know. So here in Quebec, they're looking a lot to upskilling and keep people, you know, on training. So take advantage of this moment.
Right, that's great. Wendell, did you want to add anything to that, or?
Well, in our survey that we collected in September, the companies were saying that they didn't need any specific training from the outside, but a lot of them were doing cross-training. When they had to lay some people off, they were wanting to reinforce the fact that some people that left had some critical capabilities, and so they were cross-training people to fill in those gaps so that they could continue to operate.
And that's probably helpful too with any kind of knowledge lost for retirements and things as well. That's great. Carole, really?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of productivity training requirements too. Companies are using this as an opportunity to really fine-tune their continuous improvement and tweak. And also looking at certifications, again, to build on what Heather said, really focusing on, you know, maybe there's some certifications out there that will add value to employees and also allow for a larger work package component. So, and I also can confirm the cross-training. In our experience, those are the last employees to go, employees that are able to move in various different programs and roles within organizations. And so we're seeing that already happen for companies that may have a little bit of excess labor they're trying to keep engaged.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. So which federal, provincial, or municipal programs have been the most helpful in keeping businesses going in your region? Heather?
Definitely wage subsidy. Certainly we're seeing a lot of use with that. And I'm going to say that's about the only program that's really been across the board. Of course, we represent so many different sectors. A lot of our members weren't able to collect either wage subsidy or CERB. There was a lot of talk about rent relief, but we know that program nationwide and a lot of different sectors, not just ours, wasn't as valuable as it could have been. The new iteration of the rent program, I think, is a little bit more palatable to our membership in that it's not, you know, as landlord driven as the first one. Yes. Also, I think we are getting some movement from the governments on capital funding programs that are already in place. We call them ACAP is the federal and BCAP in the province, BCAP is the provincial. We are seeing some movement, although it hasn't fully been utilized yet or actualized on reducing some of the requirements around getting some of that funding. But the wage subsidy, I think, far and away has been the one that's been most utilized, yeah.
Has anybody else seen different programs that's helped their region?
So I would go with wage subsidy, absolutely. That was the one that probably had the greatest impact. And then from the province of Ontario, the reduction in energy costs, particularly hydro, was key for a lot of our companies, particularly as they expanded the number of shifts in order to, accommodate health and safety protocols, that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely, that was something else that was viewed as beneficial. Rent program, again, I would agree with Heather on that. It sounded good, but in its execution was maybe not as successful as everyone hoped.
I have heard that as well. Yes. Anybody else want to comment on that, or can we move on to a different question?
I would say the tax deferrals in our region, that was brought up, municipal tax deferrals, different kinds of things. But as far as kind of provincial programs or municipal programs, there wasn't a lot for our kind of companies. If you're an existing client, perhaps of government, and you had a loan, they may defer your payment or look at making arrangements, but by far the wage subsidy program, and also partnership programs that are in place with EI that allows for reducing your hours of work without and doing a combo. So those kind of partnerships employers have used before in our region are using again.
Thank you. I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience since we have enough time at the end here. So I'm going to start. If you have any questions, remember you can send them to Boyd, and Boyd will pass those on to me. But in the meantime, now I guess those that are close to retirement and take retirement leave, we're going to take their knowledge with them. So how do we mitigate this issue? Has anybody got a suggestion for that?
I'll start. First of all, I think that it has to be identified as something that's of value, and that's a bit of a challenge. We find companies are more focused on who's replacing that retiring employee and investing in that process rather than investing in a process that sees an employee, phase out of the company and also transfer knowledge. But there are a number of employers that have good programs in place where it's a part-time phase out over a period of time, and they're mentoring junior employees. And some of the employers have had those programs in place for many years. And so you don't just stop and leave and go do your garden. You kind of phase out as well as you ramp up some of the newer employees. Those programs we're seeing employers tell us work really well.
Yeah, these comments. When I was with Magellan Aerospace, we had implemented that, and that worked very well. Where you would help someone who was retiring to say, "Hey, we're going to full retirement, work part time." And in that time, you're mentoring somebody else and you're transferring some of that knowledge. So I think that's a good methodology. And I think it can be used in this kind of setting, as long as those people that are retiring are actually sticking around.
Right, thanks. Nathalie? Yes.
Yeah, we've been working, with companies in Quebec for at least 10 years, to make sure that we maintain competency and we're not losing them when people are leaving. It's either for when they leave for retirement, but it's also when they leave for another company. In January we were in a major labor, critical labor, looking for people, and now we came to a stop. So company, as everybody, I guess, we have our champions, who are doing very great at keeping and monitoring competencies and keeping them and make sure they're not losing them. Some people are doing a little less better, but there's a lot of program here in Quebec, to help company, either training, either coaching, mentoring companies to help them and make sure that they're not losing that knowledge when people are leaving. So, there's funds, with the government to help them with that. So it's a very, very light program for companies, to use and to make sure that they're not at the with what happened. So many people are taking advantage to go to retirement a bit early.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we have heard that actually. Nathalie, at some point I might have to find out more about those programs actually and see if there's any best practices that we can pass on into,
of course,
to our other regions. That would be wonderful. So I do have another question, but it's really more for the national panel, I believe, because it's regarding federal. So I'm going to defer that. So I think it would be great if what I'd like to know as well is, everything that's, we've been talking about all the issues and all the problems and maybe how to help with these problems and our labor challenges. Does anybody have any good news stories? Is somebody in your region, did they pivot? Do they have a good news story that we can share and look at the positive of this. Wendell, I saw a smile, so let's start with you.
Now, we actually helped the company hire 20 people. They are an additive manufacturing company, and they're kind of on the advanced manufacturing side where they do aerospace work, and they also do hips and knee replacements. So they actually build those segments. So they were already in the medical field. So they pivoted and started to make PPE, and I think it was in September, they signed an agreement with the federal government, and I think they've hired about 70 people since. So it's they were, kind of at the right place at the right time, and were able to make that adjustment. I think some of the other companies, I think if someone made this comment earlier, those companies that are in the defense industry have been able to navigate this a lot easier than those that just rely on the commercial airlines business. We've got stories here in Manitoba where they've actually been are hiring people, and there's some collaboration with some of the companies that have laid off where they're letting their former employees know that there's these job opportunities. So there is some desire to keep those skilled people in the industry and grow from there. So I think those are two good stories.
That's great. Thank you.
I think also, if I can jump in, Theresa, in Quebec, we have Air Canada who have restart cargo transportation, to make sure that their pilots are flying and their technicians are working. So that's a good news too, to help the industry. And as probably everybody here, there's also CAE that start building respiratory, so they were already, as Wendell say, they were already in medical field, but they take the moment, they switch a bit, their production to medical, and they keep people at work, and they are hiring to assemble and everything. So that's two good news in Quebec. I can.
That is good news. It's nice that they can keep their employees engaged. I mean, that's half the battle, isn't it? Carole, is any good news stories on the East Coast?
Yeah, we have a lot of companies, as they say, because they're smaller and they do a variety of additive, expand their additive manufacturing or actually go into production with something that they were just ramping up on. But they've also indicated that they picked up some work from other companies who weren't able to fulfill contracts because they couldn't get people on the floor. So where we didn't have the same level of restrictions in some cases in Atlantic Canada, 97% of our companies operated all the way through and so they were able to pick up work that others couldn't meet, and they pivoted, and they did like a lot of companies. They focused on PPE. They called companies that were called clients they hadn't talked to for 3 or 4 years and renewed relationships and contracts again. So I think they were very innovative and focused on how you could quickly, fill those order books. We had lots of good stories. The innovation about even how companies continue to operate, reorganize their lines and their restructure physically. It's just amazing that happened really, relatively quickly in 48 hours.
That is amazing, and those are some pretty great stats, actually. Heather, would you like to add anything?
Well, I don't have any, specific good news stories about people who are or companies who have pivoted, but along the lines of, we heard people saying in the beginning, let's not waste a good pandemic. We've seen a lot of innovation and people coming together to try to help each other. But I would have to comment that from our perspective in aviation, from the very beginning, we noticed how nimble Transport Canada was at responding to our regulatory needs. And it was, it has always been, it's a safety intense business, highly regulated, and we've always had to go through all these regulatory wheels and grinding, and we just saw how quickly they could respond. So that was, for all of us, it was just like uplifting, and how much they were working hard. But I think it's the innovation. I might want to go back a little bit to the question about the people retiring. And, you know, I'm an old person. I've been retired for a while. You know, have a lot of knowledge in my head, but I don't think we're the least bit afraid of people that are moving on because of maybe earlier than they might have. Our industry is highly skilled. There's a lot of knowledge required, but I think we need to focus on the youth, focus on the people that are coming up, and see what changes that we can make. And that's something that I'd like to see us really, you know, zero in on is how can we do things differently moving forward.
Right. I'm going to come back to something you said, but I'm going to give Moira a chance to speak first, and then I'm going to come back to something there.
Thanks, Theresa. So I think there were certainly some good news stories, and I think it speaks to aerospace's engagement with their communities. So a lot of our companies, large and small, pivoted to make PPE, whether that was ventilators, masks, shields, whatever it was, for local hospitals in their own areas, although it may not have been widespread. And I think that really helps us in getting our message out to the community as to these companies are supporting their communities and doing what they can. So I think that was certainly a good news story. Not unlike some of the other folks mentioned, those in defense were able to hire during this period. So another good news story. And I think the way the community has come together, even if we look at, you know, the regional associations across the country as far as how we've all tended to work maybe a little more independently. I think maybe one of the really good news stories out of all of this, if there can be one, is the collaboration between all of the associations. So, and that includes CCAA, AIAC, all of the various regional associations. I think we're working much more collectively as a team and looking to forward that aerospace agenda on a federal level, as well as provincial and municipal and all those good kind of things. So I think that definitely is a plus.
I think that's a plus for sure. Thank you very much for that comment. So Heather, back to the outreach comment, and that is the mentorship that could happen from somebody who might be leaving the industry. Is that something that would be important to your region, the mentorship helping the youth?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And at BCAC, we've always had a mentorship program because we do highly value mentorship. We look at it a little bit differently, perhaps, than the tried and true of a two-person mentorship where someone that's been around a long time is mentoring someone that's younger. We did a program once where we did a triad where we had like a community leader, which would be someone with a lot of experience, a youth leader, and then an emerging leader. And the idea was that everyone was on an equal footing and had something to contribute and teach the other person. So sometimes I think we forget about the wisdom that that youth and emerging leaders can bring, especially in our industry where we have been doing things the same way for so long. So not to downplay at all the value of and wisdom that comes with age and experience. And I think that in our industry, we have seen a lot of, it's just something that comes naturally because we always have to train our new generation. So we do mentor and train. So it's something ingrained in us. But right now we need to really think about innovation and doing things in a different way.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to touch on mentorship or the outreach that they're doing in their region? And then we'll have to wrap it up. No, we're good. All right then. I do know that in our audience today, I'm pretty sure anyways, we do have Elevate Aviation. And so they do have a great mentorship program and they do a lot of great outreach. So I encourage everybody to take a look at their website if you want to know a little bit more about some great mentorship programs or such. And Moira, I really agree with the whole collaboration piece. and that I think we are all moving forward a little bit more, working with each other, sharing our best practices. And you have all done that with CCAA, and we appreciate it greatly. So Wendell, I see one question here for you before we wrap up, and that is, can you tell us what company pivoted towards the PPE?
The name of the company is Precision
Thank you very
ADM.
much. Somebody wanted to know. So we are going to have a 5-minute break after this panel, and then we'll hear from our national associations. But before we go, I want to thank all the regionals, because I said that this was a learning curve for us with our technology, and everybody was so patient and so wonderful and so giving of their time and their knowledge. And that's just wonderful, and we appreciate it very much. So thank you very much, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a few minutes to brag about Manitoba Aerospace and one of the initiatives that we are very proud of, which is our 20-year history of partnering with Indigenous organizations and communities within Manitoba to develop programs and services that increase the Indigenous workforce for our sector. The Indigenomic Institute from Vancouver has just honored Manitoba Aerospace by placing us on their 2020 10 to Watch list. The Institute places organizations or businesses on the list because they demonstrate excellence, innovation, leadership, and a commitment to action towards the growth of the Indigenous economy. The Indigenous population is the fastest growing demographic in Canada. However, there are still many barriers that prevent this population from fully participating in education and employment. Companies that educate themselves on these issues and implement solutions are on the road to developing a more inclusive and robust workforce. To that end, we have worked with Anishinaabe educator and facilitator to develop a workshop on Indigenous inclusion in the workplace. This course is filled with stories, and it balances the economic argument for Indigenous engagement with the personal motivation to make a difference. Due to COVID-19, the facilitator has developed a highly acclaimed virtual version of the workshop, and we are happy to be able to offer it to organizations and/or companies outside of Manitoba. If you are interested and want more information, please visit our website at www.mbaerospace.ca or contact Barb Bowen at 204-890-3032. Thank you. Enjoy your conference.